Congratulations, God says, check your balance, because this moment is not ordinary and this message did not reach you by accident. You have crossed a phase of your life where waiting felt heavier than working, where hoping felt easier than believing, and where dreaming felt safer than acting. And God says this message is appearing now because something inside you is finally ready to shift. You may not see it yet on a screen or in numbers, but you feel it in your chest, you feel it in your thoughts, you feel it in your restlessness, because when growth begins, it does not announce itself with success first, it announces itself with discomfort and confusion and emotional pressure, and you have been feeling all three lately without understanding why. And God says it is because your inner balance is being reset, your mindset is being upgraded, and your old version cannot survive in the next chapter of your life. The version that doubted, the version that waited, the version that needed validation, the version that feared failure, that version is slowly dissolving. And this process feels emotional because identity is changing, and identity change always feels like loss before it feels like freedom. And this is why after watching this message you will feel shocked, not because something magical happens outside, but because something irreversible happens inside. You start questioning your habits, your circle, your goals, your excuses, your routines, your discipline, your time management, your self-respect. And these questions are the real sign of wealth approaching, because poor mindset does not question, it complains. Rich mindset does not complain, it observes, learns, adjusts, and grows. And God says wealth is not attracted to people who want it, wealth is attracted to people who are ready for it. And readiness is not about luck, it is about responsibility, it is about self-awareness, it is about emotional maturity, it is about learning from mistakes instead of repeating them. And you have made enough mistakes to become wise. Now you have been disappointed enough to become strong. Now you have been delayed enough to become patient now. And this is why this message is reaching you, because the season of preparation is ending and the season of action is beginning. And action always feels scary because it requires accountability, and accountability means no more blaming circumstances, no more waiting for perfect timing, no more depending on motivation instead of discipline. And God says this is where most people fail, not because they lack potential, but because they fear consistency, they fear routine, they fear boredom, they fear slow progress. They want dramatic results without silent work, but real abundance is built in silence, not in noise, in habits, not in hype, in daily effort, not in emotional promises. And this is why you will be shocked after this message, because you will realize how much time you wasted looking for signs instead of becoming the sign, how much energy you spent dreaming instead of building, how many opportunities you ignored because they did not look exciting enough. And God says the greatest blessing is not sudden money, the greatest blessing is a clear mind and a stable heart, because a clear mind sees opportunity everywhere, and a stable heart does not panic when results are slow. And when these two align, success becomes inevitable, not dramatic, not viral, not instant, but inevitable. And that kind of success lasts because it is rooted in who you became, not in what you received. And God says, check your balance, not just in your account but in your life balance. Are you growing mentally? Are you improving emotionally? Are you learning financially? Are you investing in yourself physically, spiritually, intellectually? Because these are the real accounts that decide your future income, not one moment, not one video, not one message, but the sum of your daily choices. And this Message is here to remind you that abundance is not waiting for you somewhere outside, it is waiting for you to become someone different inside, and once you shift your identity, your environment follows, your results follow, your opportunities follow, your confidence follows, and people around you start treating you differently because energy changes first and reality adjusts later, and this is the real miracle that most people never understand. They keep praying for outcomes while God keeps offering them awareness, and awareness is the highest form of wealth because it makes you unstoppable, not emotionally, not financially, not mentally, and when you truly absorb this, you stop looking for shortcuts, you stop expecting instant validation, you stop fearing slow growth, and you start trusting the process because you realize the process is shaping you into someone capable of handling success without losing yourself, and that is rare. Most people receive blessings they cannot sustain, they receive money they cannot manage, they receive opportunities they are not ready for, and they lose everything because they did not build the inner structure first. But God says your journey has been slow because it was building foundation, not fame, not speed, not attention. Foundation, and foundation is invisible, but it decides everything that comes on top of it, and now that foundation is strong enough for the next level of your life, and this is why you feel pressure lately. Because growth always feels heavy before it feels light, it feels uncertain before it feels confident, it feels emotional before it feels stable, and you are in that emotional phase where the old version is dying and the new version is not fully formed yet, and this in-between stage feels confusing, lonely, and overwhelming, but it is sacred because it is where transformation happens, and this is why this message tells you to open your mind immediately before fear distracts you again. Because fear will try to pull you back into comfort, back into excuses, back into procrastination, back into self-doubt, but God says do not ignore this internal shift because this is your real opportunity, not a video, not a notification, not a promise, but a decision to become consistent, disciplined, focused, patient, and self-respecting. And when you truly commit to that, you will look back at this phase and realize this was the moment everything changed, not because life gave you something, but because you finally gave yourself a chance, and that is why the real shock is not in your bank balance, it is in your awareness, because once awareness arrives, ignorance is impossible, and once ignorance is gone, growth is unavoidable, and that is real wealth, the kind no one can take from you, the kind that compounds over time, the kind that changes generations, not just situations. And God says this is your congratulations, not for what you received, but for who you are becoming, because who you are becoming will create everything you want without begging, without waiting, without depending on luck, and that is the highest form of blessing. Because numbers have magically changed, but because your perception has shifted, and perception is the real currency of life, because what you see determines what you pursue, and what you pursue determines what you become. And God says after the first message, something inside you started questioning old patterns, old habits, old excuses, and that questioning is not accidental, it is the beginning of self-mastery, and self-mastery is the foundation of every form of success you see around you, because people who rise are not always the most talented, they are the most aware, they observe themselves, they correct themselves, they hold themselves accountable, and they do not wait for motivation, they build systems and discipline. And God says the reason you felt emotional after the first part is because truth always creates discomfort before it creates growth, because truth forces you to confront yourself, not the world, and confronting yourself is the hardest thing to do because it removes the comfort. of blaming others, blaming timing, blaming luck, blaming circumstances, and it shows you that the real power and the real responsibility has always been inside you, and this you can no longer hide behind excuses, you can no longer wait for perfect conditions, you can no longer depend on external validation, and God says this is the exact moment where most people quit because growth becomes personal, and personal growth requires honesty, and honesty requires courage, and courage requires accepting that you are both the problem and the solution, and this emotional weight is what separates those who stay average from those who transform, because average people escape discomfort through distractions, while transforming people sit with discomfort and learn from it, and God says you are being invited into transformation, not comfort into responsibility, not fantasy into awareness, and that is why the message feels intense, because intensity is the language of change, and change always feels like losing something even when you are gaining everything, because you are losing your old identity, your old mindset, your old limitations, and losing identity feels like death to the ego but rebirth to the soul. And God says after watching this second part you will start noticing small shifts in your behavior, you will become more selective with your time, more protective of your energy, more intentional with your actions, and less tolerant of self-sabotage, because awareness removes ignorance, and once ignorance is gone you cannot pretend anymore, you cannot unsee patterns, you cannot unfeel truth, and this is why the real wealth is not in external signs, it is in internal standards, the standards you set for yourself, the boundaries you create, the discipline you maintain, and the consistency you practice daily, because these things compound silently, and one day people will call it luck, they will say you are blessed, they will say you are chosen, but only you will know how many times you chose yourself, how many times you stayed focused when it was boring, how many times you stayed patient when results were slow, how many times you stayed honest when shortcuts were available. And God says this is your real miracle, the ability to evolve consciously, to upgrade your identity intentionally, to build your future deliberately, and this process does not make noise, it does not go viral, it does not seek attention, but it changes everything. And when you truly understand this, you stop chasing external miracles and start becoming the miracle, because you realize that abundance is not something you wait for, it is something you grow into, and once you grow into it nothing can stop it, because it is rooted in who you are, not in what you receive, and that is the kind of wealth that lasts. It is not glamorous. It is not motivational, it is quiet, slow, and sometimes painful, because it forces you to let go of the version of yourself that survived instead of the version that thrived, and God says most people spend their entire lives surviving emotionally, financially, mentally, spiritually, without ever realizing they were meant to grow. And you have reached a point where survival is no longer enough for your soul. You do not just want to exist, you want to feel alive, you want to feel aligned, you want to feel meaningful, and this inner hunger is not random, it is a sign of evolution, it is your consciousness asking for more depth, more purpose, more intention, more truth. And this is why you feel restless lately even when things look fine on the outside, because your inner world is outgrowing your current reality, and when inner growth exceeds outer environment, discomfort begins. Because the soul wants expansion but the habits want comfort, the mind wants security but the heart wants expression. And this internal conflict creates emotional pressure, and emotional pressure feels like confusion, anxiety, impatience, boredom, emptiness, and God says these are not negative states, they are transition states. They appear when one identity is ending and another has not fully formed yet, and this in-between phase is the most powerful and the most dangerous at the same time. Powerful because you are open to change, dangerous because you are vulnerable to fear, to distraction, to self-sabotage, to old patterns, and this is why this message keeps reaching you. Because you are at a psychological crossroad, either you evolve consciously or you fall back into familiar limitations unconsciously, and God says growth is always a choice, never an accident, and every day you either choose awareness or you choose comfort, you either choose discipline or you choose excuses, you either choose long-term vision or short-term relief. And these small daily choices are what? Build destiny, not dramatic moments, not viral inspiration, not emotional speeches, but boring consistent actions repeated over time, and this is what real abundance is made of, not luck, not miracles, not shortcuts, but structure, habits, identity, self-respect, and patience, and God says most people pray for blessings they are not ready to sustain, they want results without responsibility, they want success without sacrifice, they want freedom without discipline, and this creates frustration. Because life cannot give what the nervous system cannot handle. And your nervous system is being trained right now through discomfort, through waiting, through uncertainty, through emotional tension, so that when opportunities come you do not collapse under pressure, you do not self-destruct, you do not waste it, you do not repeat old patterns, and this training feels slow, but it is sacred, because it builds emotional strength, mental stability, and spiritual clarity, and these three together create unstoppable momentum, because now you are not chasing outcomes, you are embodying alignment, and alignment attracts without effort, it draws without force, it creates without struggle, and this is why your perception is changing, you are starting to notice what drains you, what distracts you, what delays you, what triggers you, what limits you, and awareness is uncomfortable because it removes ignorance. And ignorance was comfortable because it allowed excuses, but awareness does not allow escape, it demands growth, and growth feels emotional because it challenges identity, and identity change feels like loss before it feels like power, because you are letting go of the old self that felt familiar even if it was limiting, and familiarity feels safe even when it is harmful, and this is why so many people stay stuck, not because they cannot change, but because they are emotionally attached to who they used to be. And God says you are being detached from your old identity gently, slowly, through reflection, through restlessness, through questioning, through discomfort, and this detachment is the real miracle, because it makes space for a new self to emerge, a self that is more focused, more disciplined, more honest, more intentional, more aligned with purpose, and this self does not beg life for signs, it creates direction, it does not wait for validation, it builds confidence. It does not fear failure, it uses feedback, it does not avoid discomfort, it learns from it, and this internal shift will eventually change your external reality naturally, not forcefully, not magically, but inevitably, because when identity changes, behavior changes, when behavior changes, results change, and when results change, life changes, and this chain reaction ever outside, and God says this is the truth most people never understand. They chase external success while carrying internal chaos, and chaos always destroys whatever it touches, but you are being guided to create internal order first, clarity first, stability first, self-respect first, and from this foundation abundance grows organically, sustainably, and peacefully, and this is why this phase feels intense, because you are not just improving circumstances, you are rewriting your relationship with yourself, and that is the deepest transformation of all. The phase where nothing dramatic happens outside but everything is rearranging inside, because after awareness and responsibility comes integration, and integration is when your new understanding starts becoming your new behavior, not in one big moment, not in a sudden breakthrough, but in hundreds of small choices that nobody sees, and God says this is where real change is built, not in motivation, not in emotion, not in promises, but in consistency, and consistency is emotional because it requires you to show up even when you feel tired, even when you feel bored, even when you feel unrecognized, even when results are invisible, and this is the exact stage where most people quit, because the ego wants rewards without effort, it wants validation without discipline, it wants success without structure, but life does not work like that. And God says the reason your journey has felt slow is because you are not being prepared for a moment, you are being prepared for a lifestyle, not for a peak, but for sustainability, and sustainability requires emotional maturity, it requires patience, it requires the ability to delay gratification, it requires the ability to sit with discomfort without escaping into distractions, and this is why your mind feels different lately, you are less interested in noise, less attracted to drama, less motivated by short-term pleasure, and more drawn towards meaning, towards purpose, towards stability, and this shift feels strange because you're old. Identity was built around reaction, around comparison, around external validation, and now you are being invited into internal direction, into self-governance, into conscious living, and conscious living feels heavy at first because it removes autopilot, it removes excuses, it removes emotional shortcuts, and it forces you to face your habits, your time, your energy, your priorities. And most people are not ready for this level of self-honesty, because self-honesty means accepting that you are responsible for your patterns, not just your circumstances, and responsibility is emotional because it gives you power but also removes your victim identity, and the victim identity was familiar, it felt safe, it gave you someone to blame, something to complain about, but now God says you are being moved from victim to creator, from reactor to architect, from dreamer to builder. And this transition is uncomfortable because creators cannot hide, architects cannot pretend, builders cannot escape, they must act, they must decide, they must commit, and commitment feels scary because it removes options, it removes excuses, it removes emotional escape routes, and this is why your nervous system feels restless, because it is adjusting to a new level of responsibility, a new level of awareness, a new level of self-respect, and self-respect changes everything. It changes what you tolerate, what you allow, what you invest in, what you walk away from, and this creates emotional shifts in relationships, in routines, in goals, in boundaries, because you no longer want to live on autopilot, you want alignment, and alignment means your actions match your values, your time matches your priorities, your habits match your vision, and this coherence feels powerful but also lonely at first, because not everyone around you will understand your growth, not everyone will match your pace, not everyone will support your changes. And God says this loneliness is not rejection, it is redirection, it is making space for environments that resonate with your next level, not your past, and this emotional distance is necessary because growth requires separation from old patterns, old identities, old narratives, and separation always feels like loss before it feels like freedom, because the mind is attached to familiarity even when familiarity is limiting, and letting go of the familiar feels like stepping into uncertainty. And uncertainty triggers fear, but fear is not danger, fear is expansion, it appears when you are about to move beyond who you used to be, and God says the reason you feel emotional is because you are outgrowing old versions of yourself, and outgrowing feels like grief because you are saying goodbye to who you were, even if that version was struggling, even if that version was stuck, it was still you, and identity loss feels emotional. But identity loss is also identity creation. Because in the space where the old self dissolves, the new self emerges, and this new self is not dramatic, not loud, not perfect, but more intentional, more grounded, more stable, more self-aware, and this self does not need constant validation, it does not chase attention, it does not seek approval, it builds quietly, it grows patiently, it trusts the process, and God says this is the self that attracts real abundance, not because it demands it, but because it is aligned with it. Because abundance is not attracted to desperation, it is attracted to direction, not to chaos, but to clarity. Not to noise, but to structure, and structure is being built inside you right now, through reflection, through discomfort, through emotional processing, through letting go, through choosing differently, and these internal changes may feel invisible, but they are reshaping your future in ways you cannot yet measure, because the future is not created by events, it is created by identity. And identity is being rewritten line by line, habit by habit, thought by thought, choice by choice, and God says this is why you must not rush this phase, because rushing skips integration, and without integration growth collapses, because you cannot sustain what you have not embodied, and embodiment takes time, repetition, patience, forgiveness, self-compassion, and emotional honesty, and emotional honesty is the hardest part, because it means feeling your fears instead of avoiding them, acknowledging your weaknesses instead of hiding them, accepting your imperfections instead of pretending, and this honesty creates stability. Because now you are not fighting yourself, you are working with yourself, and when you work with yourself instead of against yourself, energy flows, motivation stabilizes, focus increases, and life starts responding differently, not dramatically, but consistently, not instantly, but sustainably. And this is the real miracle, not a sudden change, but a permanent shift in how you relate to yourself, to time, to effort, to growth, to success, and this shift is what builds a future that does not collapse under pressure, because it is rooted in self-awareness, not illusion, in discipline, not hype, in patience, not fantasy. And God says this is the stage where most people turn back because the results are still invisible, but this is also the stage where everything is being built, and those who endure this phase become unrecognizable in a few years, not because they became perfect, but because they became consistent, and consistency is the highest form of self-love, because it means you care enough about your future to show up today, even when nobody is watching, even when nothing is guaranteed, even when motivation is gone. And this is what true wealth is made of, not numbers, but character, not luck, but identity, not miracles, but mastery. And mastery is what you are slowly, quietly, inevitably developing right now. The layer where you stop thinking about change and you actually start becoming change, because there is a stage in every transformation where awareness is no longer enough, understanding is no longer enough, motivation is no longer enough, even discipline is no longer enough. What is required now is embodiment, and embodiment means your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions start aligning naturally without forcing, without pressure, without pretending. And God says this is the stage where you no longer need constant reminders, you no longer need external validation, you no longer need emotional speeches to move forward, because something inside you has stabilized, something inside you has decided, something inside you has accepted responsibility for your own evolution. And this is a very quiet stage, almost invisible to others, but extremely powerful internally, because this is where identity truly shifts, not on the surface, but at the core. And when core identity changes, behavior follows effortlessly, because you are no longer trying to become someone else, you are simply expressing who you are becoming. And this is why things start feeling different, not exciting, not dramatic, but grounded, stable, intentional, because you are no longer chasing change, you are living it. And God says this is the point where most people finally understand that growth is not about becoming extraordinary. It is about becoming authentic. It is about removing what is false, what is forced, what is inherited, what is imposed, and returning to what is real, what is natural, what is aligned. And this return feels emotional because it feels like remembering yourself after years of distraction, years of comparison, years of survival, years of reacting instead of choosing. And now you are choosing consciously, choosing your time, choosing your energy, choosing your environment, choosing your boundaries, choosing your goals, choosing your pace. And these choices feel heavy at first because they require presence, they require self-awareness, they require emotional responsibility, but over time they become lighter because they feel true, because you are no longer fighting yourself, you are cooperating with yourself. And God says cooperation with self is the highest form of peace. Because inner conflict is what creates exhaustion, not work, not effort, not discipline, but inner resistance, the constant battle between what you want and what you do, between what you know and what you avoid, between who you are and who you pretend to be, and now this conflict is dissolving slowly, not because life became easier, but because you became clearer, and clarity removes unnecessary struggle, it removes mental noise, it removes emotional confusion, it removes impulsive reactions, and this creates space inside. Space for focus, space for creativity, space for patience. Space for long-term thinking, and long-term thinking is rare, because most people live emotionally, reacting to what they feel in the moment, chasing comfort, avoiding discomfort, seeking pleasure, escaping pain, and this creates unstable lives, because emotions change constantly, but you are learning to live intentionally, not emotionally. You are learning to feel without being controlled by feelings, to think without being trapped in thoughts, to act without being driven by impulses, and this emotional regulation is the foundation of every successful life, because success is not about intelligence, not about talent, not about resources, it is about emotional stability, the ability to stay calm under pressure, the ability to stay focused during boredom, the ability to stay patient during uncertainty, and these abilities are being built inside you right now through silence, through reflection, through consistency, through self-observation, through honest evaluation, and God says this. Pro se. Feels slow because it is rewiring your nervous system, and rewiring takes time, because your nervous system learned patterns over years, patterns of avoidance, patterns of self-doubt, patterns of procrastination, patterns of overthinking, patterns of seeking approval, and these patterns cannot disappear overnight, they dissolve through repetition of new behavior, new responses, new choices, and each time you choose differently, even in small ways, you are training your system to feel safe in growth, safe in responsibility, safe in uncertainty, and this safety is essential, because without safety the mind resists change, it clings to old habits, it seeks familiar suffering instead of unfamiliar growth, but now your system is learning that growth is not dangerous, that discomfort is not a threat, that change is not loss, and this learning creates confidence, not loud confidence, not ego confidence, but quiet confidence, the kind that does not need to prove anything, the kind that does not seek attention, the kind that is rooted in self-trust, and self-trust is the most valuable asset you can have, because when you trust yourself, you do not fear failure, you see it as feedback, you do not fear rejection, you see it as redirection, you do not fear delays, you see them as preparation, and this perspective shift changes everything. Because now life is no longer happening to you, it is happening through you. And this sense of agency is what creates real empowerment, not motivation, not inspiration, not external validation, but the internal belief that you can handle whatever comes, that you can adapt, that you can learn, that you can grow, that you can rebuild. And this belief removes desperation, because desperation comes from helplessness, from feeling dependent on external outcomes, but you are becoming independent emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and emotional independence is the real wealth, because it allows you to experience success without losing yourself and